The Kremlin is now claiming there is suddenly no clarity about the next meeting that had been discussed as a possible round in Abu Dhabi. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says neither the date nor the location of the talks is confirmed and that the details will appear later. At the same time, Moscow is pretending that the escalating situation in the Middle East has nothing to do with it. Peskov insists that the current US and Israeli operation against Iran does not affect the negotiation process. While openly admitting the obvious, Washington has more on its plate these days. The Kremlin also says that a phone call between Putin and Trump is not currently scheduled. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky told the Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera that the negotiations have entered a difficult phase over the issue of territorial control. According to him, the next trilateral meeting has not been cancelled and could still take place on March 5th and 6th. But Moscow is already trying to drag the conversation somewhere else entirely. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says it's time for a comprehensive discussion about how the United States sees the future world order and what role it assigns to other countries, especially nuclear powers. In other words, the Kremlin is trying to turn talks about ending its war against Ukraine into something very different, a geopolitical bargaining session about Russia's place in the global order. After starting the largest war in Europe in decades, Moscow now appears to be asking Washington a rather blunt question: what role are you prepared to give Russia in the world? And what are you willing to concede for it to stop? Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has linked the current crisis around Iran to the broader breakdown of the international order triggered by Russia's war against Ukraine. According to Meloni, the global instability we are seeing today is a direct consequence of a permanent member of the UN Security Council launching a full-scale invasion of its neighbor. Once that line was crossed, she argued a period of chaos in international relations became almost inevitable. Meloni also called on Iran to stop its attacks in the Persian Gulf and warned that further escalation could destabilize the entire region. Italy is currently coordinating with European partners and countries in the Gulf, while also working to assist thousands of Italian citizens who may be affected by the growing crisis. The key objective, Rome says, is to prevent the conflict from spreading further. But according to Meloni, that will be impossible if Iran continues what she described as unjustified attacks.
What concerns me most is the broader context, a crisis of international law that inevitably grew out of the war in Ukraine. When a member of the UN Security Council deliberately attacks its own neighbor, it is almost unavoidable that the world will enter a period of chaos.
Europe is increasingly talking about building its own nuclear umbrella, and now Norway may join that conversation. After Denmark and Sweden raised the possibility, Oslo is now signaling it is ready to discuss the idea as well. Norwegian Foreign Minister said that country is prepared to explore the concept together with France. Paris is the driving force behind the proposal. President Emmanuel Macron has suggested expanding the role of France's nuclear arsenal as part of a broader European defense system. For Norway, the discussion does not mean hosting nuclear weapons. Minister stressed that Oslo's long-standing policy remains unchanged. There will be no nuclear weapons on Norwegian soil in peacetime. But the fact that debate is happening at all shows how dramatically Europe's security landscape has shifted. Norwegian officials openly say the threat environment is now the most serious since the Cold War. And Russia's war against Ukraine now growing doubts in parts of Europe about the reliability of long-term US security guarantees are forcing European capitals to ask a difficult question: can the continent defend itself? France is currently the only nuclear power in the European Union, and Paris now appears determined to turn its nuclear arsenal into the backbone of a new European deterrence strategy. A Russian LNG tanker, Arctic Metagas, caught fire in the Mediterranean Sea. The vessel was transporting liquefied natural gas and was already under US and UK sanctions. According to Reuters, the incident may have been caused by a Ukrainian sea drone strike, although Kyiv's involvement remains unconfirmed. confirmed. Ukrainian activist and defense ministry advisor Serhiy Sternenko later published photos of the damaged tanker. He says the vessel suffered a serious breach in the engine room and is beyond repair. Moscow quickly accused Ukraine of an act of international terrorism, claiming the attack was carried out by unmanned boats launched from the Libyan coast with the EU assistance. All 30 crew members were rescued, but the biggest story may be this. If ships tied to Russia's shadow fleet are now being hit far from the Black Sea, the war against the Kremlin's energy lifeline is quietly expanding into the Mediterranean. Ukraine is stepping up diplomatic contacts with Middle Eastern countries as tensions rise in the region following Iranian strikes. President Zelensky said he had spoken with the leaders of the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, countries that have recently come under attack as the conflict around Iran escalates. According to Zelensky, Kyiv plans to continue diplomatic engagement with partners across the Gulf and the broader Middle East. Ukraine, he said, stands with all countries resisting the spread of war and violence.
For decades, the Iranian regime has invested in destroying the lives of its neighbors and others wherever it could reach. It was on that very foundation that they became accomplices of Russia in the war against Ukraine. Every Shahed drone in Ukrainian skies proves that the Iranian regime must be held accountable for its attempts to destroy lives and kill people. It is essential that those who defend life prevail in this confrontation.
A rare moment of honesty in Russian state propaganda may have just cost someone his job. During a live broadcast, pro-Kremlin commentator Kirill Fedorov openly admitted that Ukrainian drone technology is better than Russia's. Discussing the battlefield, he said Ukrainian drones maintain stable video almost to the ground, have stronger relay networks and much better resistance to electronic warfare. According to Bild, Fedorov has since stopped appearing on air and may have been removed from broadcasts. His problems may not have stopped there. In the same discussions, Fedorov also questioned the idea of blocking Telegram in Russia, warning that such a move could actually lead to the death of Russian soldiers. That episode of Radio Russia was later deleted. Kremlin propagandist Vladimir Solovyov publicly criticized him for irresponsible statements and hinted at disloyalty. Neither Fedorov nor Solovyov has commented on whether he was fired, but one thing is very clear, that on Russian television, even a brief moment of technical honesty about Ukrainian capabilities can quickly become a problem. Russian force may have shot down their own military helicopter during a drone attack in the Rostov region. According to several pro-Kremlin aviation telegram channels, the incident happened near the town of Milerovo. The helicopter was likely deployed to intercept Ukrainian drones during a large-scale attack, but at some point it appears to have been hit by Russia's own air defense. Reports say there were casualties among the crew, though the exact number has not been disclosed. The governor of the Rostov region only reported that dozens of drones had been intercepted over the area during the night. Images allegedly showing the crash site have circulated on Russian social media, but their authenticity has not been verified. How much Putin is paying for the war against Ukraine? The total cost of the full-scale war against Ukraine may have already reached around $2.5 trillion. That estimate comes from analysis writing on Defense News, who examined military, economic and human losses. A large share of the cost comes from human losses. According to international researchers, hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded during the war. There are also massive equipment losses, operational expenses and a growing economic burden. Sanctions, the outflow of people from the country and economic pressure are costing the Russian economy hundreds of billions of dollars each year. Altogether, the losses may now exceed the country's entire annual economic output. Analysts also note that if these costs are compared to the territory seized since the invasion began, every square kilometer has effectively cost tens of millions of dollars. At the same time, researchers stress that the main burden of the war is not carried personally by Vladimir Putin, but by ordinary Russians through mobilization, casualties, and a declining standard of living. Russian drone appeared to have reached Dubai as well. Fragments of a drone marked Geran-2, the Russian designation for the Iranian Shahed 136 attack drone, have reportedly been found in Dubai after a wave of drone interceptions over the region. Videos and photos of the debris are being shared online, including by Russian tourists. Geran-2 is the same type of loitering munition Russia has used for years to strike Ukrainian cities. There is no official confirmation yet about the exact origin of this particular wreckage, but the appearance of debris with the Russian markings in one of the world's most expensive tourist hubs has triggered a wave of a bitter irony online. Some Russians in local chats summed it up bluntly. Apparently, there was a chance to get hit by their own drone. A senior Russian general commanding troops in Ukraine may have unintentionally exposed how Russia's war is really being run. According to an investigation by Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberties Project Schemes, journalists obtained gigabytes of the private messages and voice recordings from the phone of the Major General Roman Dmytryv, a deputy commander of Russia's 20th Combined Arms Army operating with the West military grouping. That formation is responsible for units fighting on the Liman front in eastern Ukraine, one of the most difficult sectors of the battlefield. The leaked communications reportedly reveal a disrupting picture behind the front lines. In private conversations, Dmytryv discusses torture and killings of Ukrainian prisoners of war, actions that international law classifies as war crimes. The messages also expose serious problems inside the Russian military, including poor command decisions, logistical failures, corruption, favoritism, and harsh treatment of Russia's own soldiers. Schemes shared the material with a journalist from the Sistema Investigative Project, who specialize in Russia to analyze the data and verify its authenticity. Dmytryv, a 40-year-old officer from Kazan and a veteran of the Chechen wars, was promoted to Major General in 2023 by Putin himself and later became Deputy Commander of the 20th Army. The investigation suggests that the private conversations of one Russian general offer a rare and unfiltered look at how Moscow's army actually functions during the war in Ukraine. That's all for now. For more content about Ukraine and the world, please subscribe.